It's May, 1909. A middle-class young girl has a reputation as a medium and has already shown materialization phenomena in her other circles. She had only just arrived in Paris in 1908. Authors have mentioned that this young woman has an unfavorable heredity. The relatives of the girl are all in respectable situations in industry and civil service. She is 23 years old at the time of these sessions. She is said to have suffered from convulsion of a nervous origin at the age of 2, leaving school at the 7.5 year. According to a baron, her mediumistic gifts were discovered by accident when a relative operated in her presence with another test person. It's noted that she has a very vivid imagination, which is sometimes so exaggerated that truth and fiction can no longer be distinguished. Her mood is unstable and easily excitable, and known to fall into fits of rage. On an extensive exam done prior to a session, German physician and psychic researcher Baron von Schrenck-Notzing noted that she had no reflex on the roof of her mouth or gullet. This would turn out to be something that would work in her favor later on. Also noted in the exam is that her sense of sex is feebly developed, but that she has a vivid, erotic imagination. Exaggerated notions concerning her feminine charms and her influence over the male sex. In the case of Eva C., no raps, no table tipping, no apports, no telekinetic phenomena, but her special faculty consists entirely in the production of materially formed bodies, beginning in barely visible and optically cloud-like or amorphous structures, and ending in the formation of solid materials or organic shapes. While at first only white patches of irregular shape were observed, masses of material were gradually developed and outlines of human forms. The impressions were very fugitive and the red light was rather dim. In the end, some human faces were seen and flashlight photos could be taken. As a rule, the medium has no subsequent recollection of her trance condition. Eva Carriere would become known as the Queen of Ectoplasm. Sup, creeps, and welcome to Creepy Confidential. Is Mothman really a supernatural force predicting impending doom? Did Apollo 11 really land on the moon in 1969? Did you find out if that was a cult that was living just 2 doors down that you waved to every single day when you got your mail? If these are the things you ponder when you should be sleeping, then I would like to welcome you to Creepy Confidential. I'm your host, Noelle, your resident weirdo Wisconsinite. I open case files on my favorite cryptids, cults, conspiracies, and other worldly creepy, with new cases, live broadcasts, and local lore. Some stories have been lost with time. Others are perhaps still happening today in your local communities, right up under your very creepy noses. So get ready, creeps. It's Creepy Confidential. Sup, creeps. Welcome to the first episode of 2025. Before we get going, I want to remind our listeners to please like and subscribe to our YouTube so that you don't miss out on our live stream episodes of After Dark. Also, check out our Patreon, where you can subscribe to different levels of ad-free episodes, free merch, and Patreon exclusive content. 2025, we are expanding. The researched topic episodes and After Dark live streams are staying, but we are adding a few extra shows and segments to help make Creepy Confidential your one-stop shop for all creepy content. Perhaps you're an author and you would like to have Creepy Confidential review your book and then have you as one of our guests for our authors chat. Shoot us an email with Authors Alley in the subject line. We would love to have you, and we would love to feature your book. Details are in the episode description. Live talks are coming to a library near you. I'm hitting the road with my special bag of goodies to teach the Creep Nation about creepy topics. The first series will be at the Columbus Metropolitan Library, and I will be diving into the world of the paranormal, my first true love. Seats will be free but are very limited, so keep an eye out for announcements. Now, on to the show. Today's episode, we are starting this two-part journey of Queens of the Seance. We're going to start with the actually known as Queen of Ectoplasm. In our modern times, we have the shock rockers, Marilyn Manson and Alice Cooper. In the heyday of spiritualism, the seance reigned supreme, and there are two ladies that really gave the audience a show and were the shock rockers of their day. In a time where many were desperate to talk to their loved ones on the other side, these two ladies brought it all to the table. A simple parlor trick, you ask? Not these ladies. Nothing simple here. They would bring their audience into a dimly lit environment, and then miraculously they would produce a spirit form, either in the shape of ectoplasm or teleplasm. Eva would be investigated by the most famous, Charles Richet at the Villa Carmen, the experiments of Albert Von Schrenck-Notzing in 1920. The Society for Psychical Research would launch its own investigation. As if that wasn't enough, the Harry Houdini, along with the famous Arthur Conan Doyle, would attend some of the SPR sittings in an attempt to debunk the possible fraud. So needless to say, everyone was out to prove her as a hoax. Martha Bernard, aka Eva Carriere, aka simply Eva C., became world-renowned as a materialization medium during the heyday of spiritualism. For over 2 decades, psychical researchers were hell-bound to try and prove that she was a hoax. Lengthy research, articles, and sitting in on her seances to try and bring her under the microscope. Martha was born in 1886 into a French army family and was the oldest of 3 girls. She was betrothed at a very young age. However, her husband died at a young age in the Congo in 1904. The father of that young husband was a general, and his wife took to holding regular spiritualist seances, initially with a young female servant, and then moving on to Martha, acting as the principal medium. At a young age, she was thrown into this crazy world, and even at that time was said to manifest spirits in some sort of quasi-physical form. Descriptions of this phenomenon had started to show up in published magazines. The family invited an author of one of those magazines to come and investigate along with Charles Richet. For those of you immersed in the world of weird and creepy, you should actually recognize this name, as he is the one who is given credit for bringing the world the word ectoplasm. Charles Richet was a philosophy professor at Sorbonne in Paris and also a psychical researcher on the side. In 1905, he famously traveled to Villa Carmen, the home of the general, and proceeded to carry out 20 sessions. And that was when he reported that he has seen something. He said that he saw the materialized phantom of a human being, which he was convinced could not be the effect of trickery. Martha moved to Paris in 1908. She was taken in by a couple who had observed a seance phenomenon produced by another famous medium, Eusapia Palladino. She lived with the couple, and it was at that time she changed her name to Eva Carriere. She did so to escape the media press that she had acquired at the villa while she was under Charles Richet's kind of eye. Odd fact to mention is that the husband also died that general, right? And then she stayed with the wife. So now, is that considered kind of a body count? She has 2 husbands, her own and this lady's husband, which was kind of made me raise an eyebrow a little bit, but maybe a curse, I don't know. But I digress. Under the wife, Juliette Besson, once that started to happen with their relationship, Juliette kind of started to keep her under her supervision, and she continued to make herself available for a subject in experiments and demonstrations, some of which were again attended by Mr. Richet. Eva and Juliette also worked with Albert Von Schrenck-Notzing, who was a German hypnosis expert and also a psychical researcher. Are you picking up a theme? Because that seems to be something everybody was into. Now, Albert's famous book, Phenomena of Materialization, a Contribution to the Investigation of Mediumistic Teleplastics, that's a mouthful, had a full experiment notation from the physical exam to patient history, to personality attributes, and then on to what she could do or not do. If you're interested in this book, you can view it at archive.org. It's a very old school written book, but it's all scanned in. Very interesting. Now, you guys know I love my books, and we dive deep into the research here. It's not wiki research, so you actually have to dive through these books. So if you're interested, archive.org actually has a lot of really cool stuff. This is also a place now where he mentions some previous experiments where Eva was able to produce this ectoplasm that appeared from her mouth and other body parts when she was in a trance state, sometimes seeming to form faces and limbs before disappearing either slowly or suddenly. And these things could be corroborated by other French scientists and intellectuals. And when I say other body parts, I mean other body parts, if you get my drift, but we'll get to that later. In 1922, the big dogs, the Society for Psychical Research, published the results of their investigation from the previous 2 years. These investigations noted similar but seemingly weaker phenomenon to that described from these earlier researchers, but they were unable to reach a positive conclusion about it, but could find no evidence to substantiate claims or fraud. So at this point, she's still in the clear, but people are definitely becoming skeptical. But this is when things start to take a turn, because allegations of fraud were made by individuals from the original house that she was at, the whole reason she changed her name. So from the original house servants from when she was still known as Martha. Suspicion continued to grow because later photographs were taken of ectoplasmic faces published by Albert, the scientist I mentioned earlier, which looked like crude cutouts of photographs that had been published in newspapers and magazines. So here she is taking pictures from the magazine. I imagine her kind of cutting it out, in local faces that everybody can see and perhaps recognize, and then turning them into some sort of Mod Podge to create a phantom. Now, it's my word, not theirs, but that's essentially what's starting to happen. And she won't be the only one that does this, but that's for part 2. Now, the water cooler talk was that the material was something that she had earlier ingested, and the results of regurgitation was how she was getting this to come out. Because remember, the physical exam that I mentioned in the intro said that she had no gag reflex, which means that she could possibly swallow things and then be able to produce them on her own. In those cases, kind of managing her tongue and things of that nature, where people can kind of swallow a string or spaghetti and then they cough it out their nose, or they kind of have these old stories of people tying something to their tooth and then swallowing it and then kind of being able to bring it up. So I personally have a feeling that this is how she's kind of pulling off this Harry Houdini style, although I know he's trying to debunk it, style phantom. Now, Richet describes the materialization as an apparent form that had powers of speech and identified itself by bien boa. It appeared more or less routinely during these sessions with Eva, and the ostensible phantom being visible at that time. Photographs taken simultaneously by himself and other sitters show a quasi-human figure covered in a substantial quantity of, like these white drapes and featuring a bearded face topped with a helmet. Richet describes it as follows. This is kind of a detailed description, so here we go. He has his head covered by a sort of casque with some metallic ornamentation, and over this casque, a turban, and falling over the ears, a sort of chin piece, which is only well seen to the right, and which covers the right cheek and ear, and seems to be applied to the neck under the casque. From the turban, the drapery descends, floating and forming a sort of pendentive. The light arm of which noting can be described is enveloped in a thick drapery extending towards Eva and completely hiding her. As to face itself of Bibi, it is rather indistinct, cloudy, or vapory. When compared with the accentuated face of the maid seated next to her behind the curtain, the nose is long, the eyes are open, as it seems, and a very thick black mustache, which appears as though glued on the upper lip, forms the base of the chin. The mustache, as it falls, masks the chin. So at this point, I think Richet is kind of onto her, but I also think he wants to believe it. But I do think he's also trying to be a scientist here. Now, Richet notes of time where he sees a white luminous ball floating over the ground, then rising straight upwards very rapidly, as if coming from a trap door. Bibi, Boa, appears and is draped in something like a caftan and a girdle at the waist. I just imagine the picture of like these old dressing caftans that they had back then, and then a loose girdle kind of fit over it, trying to create a creature, but that's just how I'm envisioning it. He is then placed between the table and the curtain, being somewhat borne out of the flooring, right? The luminous spot preceded his appearance, and if some sort of formation was forming. So this ball kind of formed, it comes, and then it kind of goes back, and then the light, the luminous spot, which I'm imagining probably is like a flashlight. I'm just kind of guessing again. The entity then appears to try a walk among them at the seance with a limp or some sort of hesitating gait, and is unable to tell, they're unable to tell if Bibi is walking or floating. Boa then goes towards the curtains to open them, and then, without opening the curtains, suddenly sinks down and disappears into the ground, and at the same time, a loud clack clack is heard, which to them sounds like the noise of a body thrown to the ground. Kind of sounds like a trapdoor. Instances, like this are what I am calling them, performances like this, is a reason why she is so infamous for her seance services. They're not just sitting around, hands on the table tipping type of situation. I mean, these are like productions, which is pretty crazy. Now, Richet really seemed to be a champion for Eva, like I mentioned, because he just couldn't prove it wrong. And it seemed to not be able to kind of just wrap his noodle around what was going on. On the other hand, the scientist points out some features that would make you raise a hairy eyebrow. The one that stuck out to me was that the formed face appeared to be similar to Eva's, and then it looked like she had stuck a coarse black mustache to her upper lip. If you've watched Nosferatu, kind of imagine Orlok's mustache, but taped to the upper lip with some spirit gum maybe of a young lady. And I mean, she is French, so maybe she just didn't, shave her mustache. I don't know. Again, chance to wax it. But I want to talk about Albert. Now, he was a fellow student of the Sigmund Freud, and he trained in therapeutic use of hypnosis with a specialty in nervous disorders. And for some reason, he became very interested in what was going on with these mediums and the phenomena of the seance room. He was introduced to Eva by another regular sitter at these sessions at Villa Carmen and carried out multiple sessions involving her as the main subject, including her in the book that I mentioned, between 1909 and 1930 in Paris, and in his laboratory back in Munich. By the time Albert got on board, the phenomena of these full subjects, that were attempting to materialize, it had kind of pittered out. But the material that was formed, that exuded principally out of the mouth, but sometimes from the other body parts, was still there and being used, or I should say being seen. Now, this is where things get a little spicy. I'm going to read a little excerpt from another overview of the experiment. This is where we start to mention ladies' body parts, so if it makes you uncomfortable, maybe this isn't your thing. But you're here for seances, so here we go. At each seance, the cabinet was closely searched. Eva was completely undressed and in presence of the experimenters, clothed in a close-fitting garment, covering her from head to toe. She was covered by a veil of tulle sewn to other garments. Her hair, armpits, nose, mouth, and knees were examined, and in some cases, even examination per rectum et vaginum was resorted to. Yes, that is exactly what it sounds like. As the materialized substance frequently came from her mouth, a syrup of bilberries was administered, whose deep coloring, the powers, you would have been able to see. Now, the strange part is that when, she went to produce the fluid, it was white, and clear, so that didn't seem to work out. Now, experimental rigor was even pushed to the point of giving her emetics before the seance. This was one of the first times reading over the experiments that I figured out what they meant by these other body parts more specifically. If you guys get a chance to read over this book, I highly suggest it. I know it's kind of technical. They really give detailed descriptions of the settings too, so you kind of get a better idea. Now, November 26, 1913, she underwent a session where they administered 2 doses of emetic containing 1 gram of ipecac and 1 gram of tartar emetic, aka antimony potassium tartrate, followed by her clothing being removed for inspection as well as the cabinet and chair again. She was then dressed in a dressing gown and the vomiting set in. Now, that vomitus was inspected, and the only thing noted was the wafers that were used for the powders that were administered and some partially digested food. So again, nothing there, no cheesecloth, no gauze, nothing like that. No evidence of the materials that they were suspecting that these specters were being made from. Ultimately, she underwent test after test from some of the most famous people of their time, including Arthur Conan Doyle and Harry Houdini, just to name a few. If you remember, Harry Houdini was on a warpath when it came to mediums. He was out to just try and end their business. And he, at one point, quote, "This thing they call spiritualism, wherein a medium intercommunicates with the dead, is a fraud from start to finish." He was not happy. No matter how scandalous, especially for the time, she found a way to make her claim to fame. She pushed the envelope in every way she could in order to publish photos of her. They actually had to blur a lot of her most of the time because of her nude breasts and kind of draped body coverings, which was, of course, super scandalous back then. You can't even show your ankles, let alone a boob somewhere. So in 1922, when she was just 36, her medium career seemed to kind of exhausted itself. And oddly, the subsequent history of her is not known. No matter how much time has passed, though, since the era that she reigned in the world of mediums, she is still known to this day as the Queen of the Seance, more specifically, the Queen of Ectoplasm. Now, as we get ready to leave you today, I give you a small reading from a letter that was sent to Albert Von Schrenck-Notzing from Juliette Bisson that recounts a rather colorful and sexually charged account of her interaction with Eva. On my expressing a wish, the medium parted her thighs, and I saw that material assumed a curious shape, resembling an orchid, decreased slowly, and entered the vagina. During the whole process, I held her hands. Eva then said, "Wait, we will try to facilitate the passage." She rose, mounted the chair, and sat down on one of the armrests. Her feet touching the seat. Before my eyes, and with the curtain open, a large spherical mass, about 8 inches in diameter, emerged from the vagina and quickly placed itself on her left thigh while she crossed her legs. I distinctly recognized in the mass a still, unfinished face whose eyes looked at me.
On Wiki Travel, the Pacific Northwest is best known for its beautiful coastline, green interior, rainy weather, and spectacular mountains. But because of all this, it's also the perfect place to go missing. My name's Carmita, and I grew up in the Pacific Northwest in Portland, Oregon. I host a podcast called Missing in the PNW. My podcast is different from others you may have heard because I focus specifically on 2 things. The first is that all of the missing person cases that I cover are strictly from the Pacific Northwest in Oregon and Washington. I know, the title of my podcast should have given that one away. The second thing is that my podcast focuses strictly on missing persons from marginalized communities, such as the Black, Hispanic, Native American and Indigenous people, and the LGBTQ plus communities. You know, the ones that get absolutely no media attention. Now, I am not an investigative journalist or a reporter. I'm actually a widowed mom of 3 who loves true crime and has a passion for social justice. So join me in helping to spread the word on these missing person cases and help be the voice for the ones that are now voiceless. You can find Missing in the PNW on all of the major streaming apps, as well as on socials at Missing in the PNW Podcast. If you have a case you want me to cover, please email me at missinginthepnw@gmail.com or send me a message through Facebook Messenger. I hope to talk to you soon. And remember, have fun, but be safe.